So today's topic is turkey stock, and of course, just like chicken stock, there are unlimited possibilities of what you can do with it. But for the next couple weeks on this channel, I'm going to be focusing on Thanksgiving related stuff. So if you're looking to take your stuffing and gravy game to the next level, this is the video for you. So let's do this. All right, the first couple of questions you're probably gonna have when it comes to making stocks are what to use, how much to use, what's the difference between stocks and broths, and things like that. Well, as a general rule, stocks are made from bones and broths are made from meats. You do get more collagen and gelatin extraction from bones, but you get more flavor from meats. So I think for home preparations, it's kind of good to do sort of a mixture of the two. So as far as what I like to use when making stocks, it kind of depends on what I'm making and what's available. For instance, in the case of chicken stock, you can pretty much get any part of the chicken at any store. So that's a really easy one to work with. So in that case, I'll just combine whatever scraps and trimmings I have in my freezer with whatever the cheapest option is I can find at the grocery store. Usually it's like a 10-pound bag of leg quarters. A lot of times you can get those for like $5. So for chicken stocks, that's a really great way to do it. Turkeys, on the other hand, or turkey stock, that's a little bit more challenging. So around Thanksgiving time and in the month of November, there are usually a few more options that show up on the store shelves when it comes to turkey, but throughout the rest of the year, it can be kind of slim pickings. You might see some turkey breasts, maybe some ground turkey, or some drumsticks, or if you're lucky, some turkey necks. But unless you're cooking whole turkeys on a regular basis and saving up the carcasses to use stock, it can be kind of hard to figure out what to use to make turkey stock. What I like to use are turkey necks, like you see here, and honestly, turkey drumsticks. And I don't give a shit what anybody says about these things. These things are fucking impossible to eat, so they belong in a stock pot. Sorry, I just had to say that. And we do really need to stop kidding ourselves about these things. There are way too many ligaments and tendons inside these things to really enjoy eating them. I've never known anyone to eat one of these things and be like, wow, that was really fun eating that. Instead, what usually happens is they eat it and they're like, wow, that was the most miserable food experience I've ever had, and I never want to do that again. I want a different part of the turkey. So I'm going to start things off with roughly 12 pounds of turkey parts, which in this case will make around 6 quarts or 1.5 gallons of stock. So while I'm rinsing off the pieces here, a good ratio to keep in the back of your head is that 8 pounds of bones will make 1 gallon of well-flavored, full-bodied stock. And you don't have to get too crazy with this step either. Just look for the water to run relatively clean out of the pot, and this will produce a more crisp, clear, and clean stock. So after rinsing, let's just say you didn't weigh the parts or you don't care to, covering them with 2 to 3 inches of water should put you somewhere in the neighborhood of where you need to be. So over at the stovetop, set the heat between medium and high, and while that heats up, let's fill a small mixing bowl with hot water, and this is going to help with skimming the stock pot. So after about 15 minutes, the stock is close to a boil, but it's not all the way there. And they always say that you shouldn't let a stock boil, and while that is true, you do want to bring it high enough to break loose some of the gunk or impurities that are attached to the bones. The higher heat will also help push this stuff to the surface, making it easier to remove. And another good trick to use here is to dig the skimmer down into the pot to help free up more of this stuff. In French cooking, the term dépouillage is used to describe this skimming process. So once you've done all this and you've got the pot looking a bit more clear, drop the heat down to low, and you want this in a gentle simmer for 2 to 2.5 hours, and at that point you can start getting your vegetables ready. And in the galaxy of stock making, you're generally going to use a mixture known as Mirepoix, which is comprised of 2 parts onion, 1 part celery, and 1 part carrots. And the ratio you're going for here is 1 pound to be used for 1 gallon of stock. So to sum up the ratios, for 1 gallon of stock, use 8 pounds of bones and 1 pound of Mirepoix. And if you're wondering about other vegetables that might be usable here, think ones that aren't going to introduce any overpowering or bitter flavors. Also steer clear of vegetables that will cloud or discolor the stock. So mushrooms, tomato, fennel, garlic, leeks, those are all acceptable, but I'd steer clear of potatoes, winter squashes, cabbages and Brussels sprouts, spinach, and things like that. And to go back to the ratios, they don't have to be exact, but in the interest of consistency, it's good to keep these numbers in the back of your head. And once your knife work is all finished up, these vegetables can go directly into the pot along with a small handful of thyme sprigs sprigs, 5 or 6 parsley stems, and 3 or 4 bay leaves, and this needs to simmer for another 45 minutes or so. And while the stock pot with all of the ingredients is simmering away, we can get our straining setup ready. Start with a large sturdy mixing bowl, place a strainer inside and line the strainer with a few layers of cheesecloth. And when it's time to strain the stock out, it's important to take proper safety precautions. The stock pot and its contents are extremely hot and the pot is very heavy. The last thing you want to do is burn yourself, and the second last thing you want to do is make a large mess. What I like to do is to pull out some of the ingredients and discard them prior to picking up the stock pot, which makes straining much easier. If you're uncomfortable with that, use a smaller sauce pot to scoop out the contents and make the whole thing lighter. Do whatever you feel is safest and what you're most comfortable with. And as you can see, sometimes the cheesecloth is a bit less cooperative, so you might have to line it back up a few times. Either way though, when you get the stock pot emptied out, fold up the cheesecloth, remove the strainer, and I usually like to let the stock cool for an hour or two prior to putting it in the refrigerator, especially because I have glass shelves, so you want to be careful there. But for now, that's it for turkey stock, and you can see that stocks really aren't that hard to make. It's more about following proper procedure and just letting it do its thing. Okay, moving forward today, I've chilled the stock overnight, and what happens during that time is that the fat collects together and solidifies on top, and it becomes very easy just to skim it off and remove it. And something else you'll notice is that if you did this whole thing right, the stock should have somewhat of a gel-like consistency, and that means that you properly broke down the connective tissue and collagen into gelatin. So if it has a gel consistency, you did the whole thing right. All right, to sum this whole thing up, 8 pounds of bones plus 1 pound of Mirepoix will make 1 gallon of stock. And if you don't measure out the bones, cover them by about 2 to 3 inches of water, and that'll put you somewhere in the ballpark of where you need to be. Then put the stock on the stove, bring it up close to a boil or high enough to push everything up to the surface, skim all of that off, then drop the heat down to a simmer it for about 2 to 2.5 hours, then work in your vegetables and herbs and simmer those for about 45 minutes beyond that. Strain the whole thing out, chill it overnight, remove the fat from the surface, then it's ready to go into Tupperwares and into your freezer. So with that, that's the end of the video. I hope you found it useful and helpful, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.